David Pakman. I just got to Hungary moments ago, and 4 people have asked me what the mood is in the US. So I'm going to punt that question to you. What's the mood in the US?
US is a big country, 340 million people. Depends who you ask and what part of the country you're in. I think to summarize, there's a few groups. I think the MAGA people love what Trump is doing, even if they don't totally understand it. And even if it's not so good for them, they see the blanket tariff policies and the kind of yelling at Zelensky and Ramaphosa in the Oval Office and this sort of thing as evidence of kind of alpha male behavior. He's in charge and he's very strong and kind of this sort of thing. And whether that persists if the blanket tariffs remain is a question. So you've got that group. You've got Republicans like Rand Paul in the Senate and Thomas Massie in the House, who are really more traditional libertarian or fiscal conservatives. They don't like what Trump is doing. Massie voted against the recent tax bill because he rightly says, hey, this blows up the deficit. We're supposed to be against this on the political right. Rand Paul is very much against the blanket tariff policy. So you've got, a group of Republicans that are kind of in that space. And then I think on the left, you've got a lot of different things. I mean, the left is pretty big. If you go from the socialist left to the center left, kind of Hillary Clinton, that's a huge range. So you find everything from concerns about the authoritarian slide that we're seeing from Trump, and we can dig into the specifics of that, to people who are sort of like, yeah, Trump's bad, but Harris would have been just as bad, right? Those are folks usually to the further left. So you've got a range there as well. But overall, if you look at approval numbers, they are the lowest they've ever been for a president at the 120-day mark in 80 years. So that's kind of the 30,000 foot.
Are they also among the highest or no in terms of approval rating?
No, they're the lowest.
I know, so the number of people who disapprove is low, but my understanding was the number of
people who disapprove is high.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, now I've muddied it and confused it. It's my bad. The number of people who disapprove is high. Sorry, I'm super jet lagged. But isn't it the case that the number of people who approve is also at a high, or no? Did I get that wrong?
No, the approval is historically low for 120 days into a presidential term.
Okay, cool. You mentioned something I want to talk about. You mentioned on the left, and I've been having a lot of trouble with what that means. I think I take Andrew Doyle's position that's I've been saying for a while. I'm not really sure what that means. I'm not sure that's helpful either. Not even a heuristic. So what does that mean to be on the left? Like, is there a defining characteristic or a suite of propositions one believes if one is on the left?
It depends on where on the left you are, so I can kind of speak to where I am, but I do think you've mentioned something that's actually maybe the most interesting thing, which is this left-right spectrum thing, just like a binary that goes, just like a line, and where are you on the line? It is not robust enough, I believe, especially right now, to really describe people's political views. I think a better way. Now, I still use it because I want to be understood. And if I start using a different system and people go, I don't even know what you're talking about, I just won't be understood. So we'll get back to that. Okay. I think a better framework is if we think about it as a 4-quadrant matrix, where we are looking at social liberalism versus conservatism kind of on one axis, and then authoritarian libertarian on another axis. So you could be an economic libertarian and a social conservative, and that would put you in one quadrant. I think that's definitely more robust. So like for me, I tend to libertarianism, small L, not the Libertarian Party, but just my default is don't involve the government unless we have a good reason to do so. I think in some areas like healthcare, we have a good reason to do so. So I would be libertarian on that scale and a social liberal where gay marriage, I don't care, do whatever you want. So I think that the 4-quadrant system is better. A lot of people still just kind of say left and right. So working within left and right, I'm a social democrat. And so for me, I'm worried about disproportionate power of moneyed interests over society. I think that
I
that is
like that.
something.
Sorry to interrupt. I like that. I like that. I'm worried about. I like that. I like that. I like that. Okay, so tell me what you're worried about, because that tells a lot about one's political leanings, what they're concerned about.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the really big differences is the right would put as a much higher concern government involvement in stuff. Whereas I think generally on the left, we're more worried not primarily about government involvement, but about systems and structures that predispose to unfairness and inequality. These aren't absolutes, but I think like very top level, that would be one way to kind of enter the discussion of what it means to be left and right. But I can see, again, I just think left-right spectrum is mostly too simplistic for anything but the most simple conversations.
Yeah, the only advantage I can think of, and I'm not being facetious when I say this, is it doesn't have many syllables, so it's kind of quick to get out.
That's an
I've been
advantage.
Yeah, I've been I left Hungary for a bit, and I'm back in Hungary right now. Sorry if people always call my fold my arms. I'm nursing a horrible shoulder injury while I keep re-injuring it. But when you talk to conservatives here, and I interface with a lot of liberals and conservatives, mostly conservatives, maybe a 70-30 split, think tank fellows, public intellectuals, etc. Universally, and I can sincerely tell you this with complete honesty, and because I've explicitly asked them, what do you think about Trump's Ukraine policy? And they've even there's no secret, I'm affiliated with the Danube Institute, and they're baffled by it. But conservatives here are confused. They don't understand it. They're worried about its escalation. They're worried that the Russians will, Poles have now enacted conscription. Other Eastern European countries are talking about it. Macron's talking about, this is old news, but talking about rearmament. The United States Trump has talked about, explicitly and repeatedly talked about, I don't know if he's going to do it, but withdrawing from NATO, and NATO is useless. Europeans are going to have to pay for their own defense. So I mention that only because that's not the right of yore. That's not the Soviet Union. The Russians were the bad guys. That's not. It also strikes me as very interesting that people seem to forget that Ukraine is in Europe. There will never be another war in Europe. What do you think Ukraine is? But I don't know. I don't see. I see maybe European conservatism, if we can even use that, as distinct on a number of issues from American conservatism. And I wonder if you could comment on that.
I think that that's probably right. I mean, I'm not an expert on European conservatism, but from the folks I've spoken to, interviewed, and what I've read, it seems as though, other than the nationalist right of Europe, which I don't think it's at its peak now, I think it was at its peak maybe in 21, and it started to decline actually to some degree, but other than the ultra-nationalist European right, it seems as though there's more of an adherence to the more traditional conservative ideas in Europe that have been mostly abandoned, certainly by MAGA in the United States. You've got like a Rand Paul and a Thomas Massie, like I mentioned, who still are sort of sticking to that in the US, but MAGA has become a completely different thing. So it seems to me that exempting the ultranationalist European right, the right of Europe is more aligned with what maybe like a Reagan or even a George W. Bush were.
Yeah, and Reed and I just did a spectrum street epistemology for whether or not MAGA is Republican and MAGA is conservative. And we did it with conservatives, Rod Dreher, Melissa O'Sullivan, deputy director of the Danube Institute, among other people. And there was a wide-scale disagreement among them about what MAGA was, whether it was conservative, whether it was Republican, whether it was an entirely a different beast. Okay, so you have written a book that Reed will pull up here. And I wanted to ask you, the book is The Echo Machine, How Right-Wing Extremism Created a Post-Truth America. So can we please start by defining some of these terms? What do you mean by right? Now that we know what you mean by right, what makes an extremist? And then if you could please define post-truth.
Yeah, I mean, so post-truth is simpler. It's just that empirical facts no longer matter or serve as a basis for where conversations start. We've got a misunderstanding as to what sorts of statements are even statements of fact versus statements of opinion. I delve into the research on that in the book. This kind of shared basis where we can disagree on policy, but we're starting with the facts and then we argue about the policy, that's kind of gone. Where now we are even just trying to say what sorts of statements count as fact. And I think that that's a very difficult place to even get to policy from, and maybe we'll get back to that. In terms of right-wing extremism, this links to the last thing you said, which is I don't believe there's anything conservative about MAGA and the forces that have taken over the Republican Party right now. I see it more as a sort of reactionary anarcho-libertarianism, and that's a lot, and we could delve into that. But just to, fiscal conservatism would be one way to say at one point the Republican Party was basically fiscal conservatism.
Oh, they're definitely not that now.
They're definitely not that now. So I think that it's become this kind of reactionary anarcho-libertarian movement. And by extremism is relative to everything else, right? Whether something is extreme has to do with where is the middle and sort of what would it mean to be moderate. And then relative to that, you think about what does it mean to be extreme.
Okay, hold on. I want to linger on this before my jet-lagged mind loses it. So if the idea is that the Republicans, or at least MAGA, I don't know how you want to say it, this incarnation of the Republican Party has gone debt crazy or not concerned about the debt, would that mean that they do that because they're anarcho-libertarians and they want to bring about an anarchy, or they do that because of a casual indifference to the debt?
I think it's the latter. I mean, the book talks a lot about the debt and deficit thing. And one of the things that I've identified is even the supposedly strongest held principles right now within the MAGA Republican Party are no longer so important once they become politically inconvenient. And there's a lot of examples we could give, but debt and deficit is a good one, where there's this kind of claim placating the idea that we must balance the budget and we need to get a surplus so that we can start paying down the national debt. Trump said in his first term he would have the national debt paid off. Of course, it actually got bigger rather than smaller.
Correct.
And so the
That's factually true.
The principle that we need to prioritize always fiscal responsibility as defined by reducing the deficit, as soon as they want the Golden Dome defense system, which is the new thing, or tax cuts for the rich, or whatever the case may be, things that will increase the deficit, they go, actually, that wasn't quite so important. We care more about this other thing. And you can apply that to business regulation. You can apply that to the concepts of freedom and liberty. These principles that they claim to hold very dear become very unimportant when they are politically inconvenient.
Well, I have a hard time comprehending this. Why?
Well, you're saying, why do they claim that they really care about these principles and then abandon them?
Yeah, at one level. And another level, why don't they actually really care about the principles and then discharge those through policy?
Why they don't really care about them, you'd have to ask them. That I don't know. My interpretation is there's a need to put together some apparently coherent set of beliefs in order to justify your existence as a political movement. So they go, okay, we're for fiscal responsibility as defined by reducing the deficit. We're for low regulation, so on and so forth, because otherwise you're not offering anything. You've got to offer something. The truth is what they're really about is, at least the MAGA prism, is what's good for Trump and his friends. When what's good for Trump and his friends conflicts with these principles, well, they get away from the principles because they never really mattered. I see those principles more as a ruse than anything else.
Yeah, you're right, by the way. I'm sorry I asked you that question. I am guilty of what I criticize NPR for. It's I should ask somebody who supports the principles as opposed to you who doesn't support those principles. So I apologize for that. Okay, so who is more responsible for post-truth? Is it the right-wing extremism or left-wing extremism, the right or the left, or what? Who
Well,
is
listen,
responsible?
I have a perspective. My perspective is that the right is more responsible for it. If you have, right-wing viewers and listeners, my guess is that they will disagree with me, at least to some degree. I don't think the left is blameless here. And in fact, in the book, I devote an entire section to criticizing this kind of postmodern, everybody's truth is just as valid thing that has taken place on the fringes of the left. I'm against that. I'm against identity politics on the left. I'm against
I
the
would say I would push back and say far more than the fringes.
Okay, we can talk about that. But so I don't think the left is blameless here. But what we saw, particularly during that first Trump term, where, Kellyanne Conway overtly saying, we have alternative facts. And it's like, well,
Right.
facts are facts. When
Right.
we saw JD Vance after the whole they're eating the cats, they're eating the dogs thing, JD Vance saying, hey, you know what? Even if these things aren't literally true, we have the right to generate these media cycles to get attention for things we think matter, even if they don't actually adhere to any factual basis. So my opinion is, and I tried to defend this in the book, that while you can assign blame to both political sides, that especially over the last decade, this is far more a reality on the political right.
And so when you say that, you mean it's like institutionalized or it's normative among the established republic? Like, what do you mean by that?
It's become completely normalized. Yeah. I mean, listen, you look at the recent, in fact, it's become so standard that it rarely gets the attention it probably deserves anymore. I mean, just to give like one example, this
Yeah.
recent tax bill that the House passed in the middle of the night 2 days ago,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
objectively, every think tank, economist, everyone who is not politically partisan that has looked at that bill says this bill will raise the deficit and this bill will lead to 8 to 13 million people losing health care coverage through Medicaid or Medicare. That's the closest thing we would have to an objective reality on that bill. And yet, casually, in press conferences and Q&A sessions, everybody from Trump on down, other than like 5 Republicans we can name, insists it's going to generate so much growth that the deficit will go down and nobody's going to lose their coverage. And those are outright lies, indefensible by any objective metric. But it's just kind of like, okay, I don't know. I guess it's a matter of opinion, maybe, or we're not really going to follow up. It's just completely standard that that's what they
Okay.
say, despite the fact that there's no basis for it.
Okay. So just a few things. A lot is flooding my my jet-lagged head right now. So when you say that there have been who's been against the bill, like has there been like the Cato Institute or AEI or the Manhattan Institute? Like, has there been a think tank that like who's been opposed to the bill? A conservative organization against it?
I don't follow the conservative organizations closely, so I don't want to guess or speak just randomly on that. I've been looking more at nonpartisan sources. So, for example, the Congressional Budget Office scores legislative proposals. It's a nonpartisan organization, and they just say, here are the numbers, here are the facts. I don't know Cato or AEI's positions.
Okay. So I want to go back to this right-wing extremism claim because I just find it so interesting the way that you framed it. And someone today on the phone said that they don't like when I use the word framing like that. So maybe I should stop using that word. But I like the way that I find it interesting the way that you I don't know boxed it. I don't framed it, but
Contextualize.
Yeah, contextualize it. Yeah, maybe that's better. Isn't this idea, when you talk about post-truth and everybody has their own alternative facts, and my crowd was bigger than your crowd at the years ago. Isn't that very similar to something that we see that's ubiquitous on the left and taught in academia of my truth? I have my lived experience tells me this. It doesn't matter what the evidence is. Objectively, it's my lived experience trumps any kind of it's a kind of the subject turn towards subjectivity as manifest. And again, I don't really like the term the left, so let's just use it as a placeholder term, but among large swaths of the left.
Your question is, isn't it, are the two things the same thing?
Well, wouldn't it be that it's a manifestation of a kind of applied postmodernism, as Helen Pluckrose describes. It's a manifestation of alternative truths, alternative facts, but the left and the right just have different ways to box it. They just have different ways that that's linguistically expressed, and then that it trickles down through policy decisions.
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong. I think the difference is, and this is where a lot of these conversations kind of, it's not that they get derailed, but they just stop making progress because it comes down to how do we measure it. I've denounced what you're talking about to the degree that it exists on the left. It just has barely any place in the national democratic discourse. And I know that one of the real, I'm guessing you'll disagree with me on that. And one of the places where this often becomes a hang up is I'll have conversations with people who go, no, this is everywhere on the left. And then when we really dig more deeply, it does exist in online spaces. But Democratic voters in Michigan who are voting for Harris and then getting back to work, for example, they're not participating or into any of that stuff that you're talking about. I really do see it as extraordinarily fringe. You know what, in fact, if you look at, for example, Kamala Harris's campaign, which, by the way, was a terrible campaign. It's not me saying this was an awesome campaign.
Yeah,
but if you look at Harris's campaign, what you're describing, this application of this postmodernism, it had essentially no place whatsoever in that campaign. It existed on Twitter or wherever it's moved to now that a lot of people are off Twitter, but it's not really playing any role. In fact, a more common criticism from people positioned where I am is that the way that the Democratic Party has been running is arguably too far to the center. So I agree with you. I've been against the my truth is just as good as anybody's truth. I've been against everybody's opinion is equally valid. I don't participate in any of that stuff. It's just not taking hold in the orthodoxy of the left the way that it is MAGA. I mean, it's on every single issue, it is MAGA.
Yeah, I want to go back to something you said. When you said the Democratic Party should, what was that about again? About moving to the center? Yeah.
No, well, there's a debate about whether the Democratic Party should be running more to the center or more to the left, and that's a debate that is an interesting one, sort of like a tangential issue to what we're talking about. But in that discussion, from the sort of core of the Democratic Party, I don't even hear a hankering for moving into the postmodern stuff that I do think exists on the fringes and I oppose.
Okay. So I think you've helped me flesh out some of the ideas, kind of like a pointillism painting. I've gotten the dots and I'm putting it together. I want to talk to you about something more serious, something that I've been thinking about a lot lately. And I, as I always tell Reed, one of the reasons I love doing this is that I get to talk to smart people about the stuff I think about. So I'll just come right out and say it. I'm not even concerned anymore. I'm past the threshold of concern and into worry about all this Jew hatred everywhere. This Heil Hitler Yee's song, people, surrounding his, put up that video if you can, in Hollywood, where Reed used to live, surrounding his star. Yeah, that's another lunatic over there. That person has 3.4 million followers in TikTok, and they're basically, there's another influencer here. I've never heard of her personally, but she's praising Hitler and doing the Nazi salute. And then that song, I don't know if you heard it with that other lunatic, Yee. I'm looking for the star, Reed, in Hollywood, where they're just, standing in line, standing in a circle around his star. Yeah, that's it. Just play that. Just play that for a second, so we can hear it.
Howdy, nigga, howdy, nigga, howdy. All my niggas Nazis, nigga, howdy, nigga, howdy, nigga, howdy. All my niggas, nigga, howdy.
Okay, this is insane. This is insane.
Howdy, nigga, howdy.
Yeah, that's good, Reed. I don't want to listen to that.
Nigga, howdy.
So, I
All my
just
niggas Nazis, nigga. How?
I can't take it anymore.
How?
Reed's doing that to torture me. That's Reed's way of saying he needs to get paid more. So what is your take on all, the assassinations, open Jew hatred? A few months ago, Reed and I were in New York when they were surrounding a Jewish deli and screaming at people. What's your take on all this?
Well, I think it's disgusting and deplorable. And one of the sad things about anti-Semitism is that it has it has chapters on the political left and the political right, and that's one of the things that it's an extraordinarily it's a multi-thousand-year long xenophobia, racism, call it what you want. It's been around a very long time, and it has found traction on the political left and right in different forms, right? On the right, it takes more this kind of like fascist Nazi imagery and ideology. On the left, it often is about the exclusion of Jewish voices in conversations because Jews aren't discriminated against enough, so they don't count as intersectional. Or anti-Zionism.
I mean, they're not discriminated against. So I shouldn't even joke about this. Like, what do you need another Holocaust? Like, what does that even mean? They're not discriminated.
It's crazy.
Against,
or also,
insane idea.
You see legitimate criticism of Israel go over into just overt anti-Semitism, use of anti-Semitic imagery and language on the left. So it's disgusting. It's across the political spectrum, and the resurgence is extraordinarily disturbing.
So I'm just trying to grapple with so many things that I'm trying to wrap my head around, but failing to wrap my head around. So, for example, I think you'll agree, but I certainly don't want to put words in your mouth, that by all accounts, the Chinese have committed a genocide, or I don't know if it's still ongoing, among the Uyghur. Hold on 1 second. 1 second. Sorry about that. But you don't see, nobody is shooting the Chinese ambassador or embassy staff. You don't see, like, there is something uniquely, it is just Jew hatred.
Yeah.
I mean, you could literally go around the world and find conflicts, and nobody seems to be upset with these conflicts. I shouldn't say that.
I think if you presented that, there are some who would say, well, Peter, the difference is the U.S. is less involved in some of those conflicts. So as Americans, we should be more focused on conflicts in which the U.S. is involved directly or indirectly, financially or militarily. I think that there's some truth to that. But to your greater point, I think it's obviously the case that, I mean, listen, you look at what's going on. This is not whataboutism. It's just let's explore why the conflict in Myanmar, Sudan, Ethiopia, the Uyghurs, there's a dozen of these, just are far less emotionally salient for a lot of people in the United States. I think there's a few answers to that.
There are also no large-scale marches that I've seen about the Yazidi being. I was looking at a Twitter account today about pretty ghastly things that have been done to the Yazidi. No, I didn't see any protests on campus when that was going on. I don't see any protests about I just don't see any large. Forget about assassinations. Is it that? I mean, I'm asking you a sincere question when I ask this. Is it that people cannot differentiate between somebody who's Jewish and somebody who has a policy position? Do they think all Jews are personally responsible for? Is that what's going? Again, maybe it's an unfair question to you because you don't believe it. But
this is complicated because there's an all of the above here. So you've got, number one, it's an attractive and appetizing storyline because you can attempt to apply a very simple oppressed versus oppressor analysis. And even though only some Jews look what might be considered white, that's enough to say, I see the white people here oppressing brown people. And so that incorrect oversimplification makes it an appealing oppressed versus oppressor storyline. That's number one. Number
Okay.
two, there's a confusion between global Jews, Israeli Jews, and the Israeli government. And I've had, there
Okay.
was this disgusting brunch. I remember it because it was so insane. I went to it a few years ago, and someone I had just met finds out that I'm Jewish and starts asking me to defend the policy of Benjamin Netanyahu and saying, why this and why that? And I said very calmly, I said, I know you may not see this, but what you're doing right now is several steps towards the anti-Semitism that we're dealing with, which is you're associating me as an American Argentinian who spent 12 days in Israel in my life, as in some way tied into the policy of the government in a way where, and the counter that I often give is the following. When I would go to France when Trump was president the first time around, and I would
Yeah.
meet French people and they would learn that I'm American, they didn't ask me to defend Trump's policy or hold
I
me
was just
responsible for
I
what
was
Trump
just
did.
thinking that. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I
I
was
think
just thinking that. So that tells me, okay, so if we had someone who was Chinese here or someone who was Russian, I would have a hard time believing that they would be grilled about Putin's invasion of Ukraine. Maybe, but I would argue if it were, it would be a super unlikely and fringe thing. There is something unique that people do with Jews that they just don't do with anybody else. Nobody
yeah, no,
grills
I
the
think that's true.
Chinese about the Uyghurs. So,
Yep.
Okay, good. I'm glad you agree with that. So then the question is why? Like, there's just something uniquely wicked about Jew hatred that you just and it's ubiquitous, and I find it viscerally disturbing to me on a number of levels and for a number of reasons. And I leaving that's my lived experience, leaving behind my personal feelings about that for a moment. What explains that?
I
Like
don't think there is one answer to that. I mean, like I said, I think what explains it is there's a media and cultural focus that is not on any of the other conflicts you mentioned. There's a very clean and attractive perceived power imbalance. There is significant moral oversimplification that is replicated in these activist echo chambers. In some cases, it's just flat out, I don't have any problem with Chinese people, but I don't like Jews, right? Just straight up Jew hatred. And it's just that simple. I think it's tribal politics and selective empathy. I mean, I think that there's a lot of explanations here.
All right, before you go on, in the media, do you think that imbalance, the oppressor and oppressed narrative, do you think that's coming more from left-wing media? And this is not a trick question, or from right-wing media?
Media is the
I know
oppressor-oppressed
I
narrative.
I use that as a plural noun, but I basically meant legacy media.
From legacy media. Oh, I mean, listen, the oppressor-oppressed narrative is probably coming more from left-wing independent media, and I don't know that that narrative is as present in legacy media. I guess would be where I'm at on that.
Okay, so this is an impossible question, and I don't mean to God, what's that expression? I can't even remember my English right now. Jump you with this. What is, because I have an idea about a solution for this. I love intractable problems, and if there was ever an intractable problem, this would be it. What do you think the solution for this is? And maybe as a way to answer that, and I'll go first. I will tell you what I think a solution is not.
Okay.
I bet you if tomorrow every Israeli said, you know what, this whole Israel thing, it's not working out, and we're going to barter the state of Israel for peace, and we're going to live happily ever after. We're going to give it up willingly, and we're going to fly, and we're going to go to Manitoba. I don't think that would end the problem. Do you agree?
I don't think that that would solve the problem of anti-Semitism and Jew hatred. No.
Okay, good. We're on the same page. So I don't think that the conflict is about land or Gaza. I think that's bullshit. I think that's a smokescreen.
I think that this is not fundamentally a land conflict. No.
Okay,
I mean,
so we're in
agree.
agreement.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're in agreement.
Yep.
So I'm trying to say this without giving away my total hand, because I have an idea here. What do you say about the idea, the claim that it's somehow jealousy? That yeah, go ahead.
No, I don't know. I mean, that's sort of like under the category of the psychologizing, and I think, I don't know. I hesitate to say that that's the impetus here.
So so if I may jump the whole middle of the conversation and go to the end, what's the solution?
I have no idea. I mean, listen, here's what I can tell you. What does, if I think of this within the diplomacy and political space, I've outlined like a 12-point, I believe if there will be a solution, it's going to approximate the following roughly 12 points. And I don't know that this is the appropriate thing for our conversation, but it's the sort of stuff about how is the land divided, who's in charge of different elements.
Oh, you're talking about Israel.
Yes, yes.
Oh, I was talking about strictly Jew hatred.
Strictly Jew hatred. No, that's I wish I had more of a sense of a solution there. I just don't have one.
Can I throw something out to you then? Can I throw my ideas out to you and you tell me if they're what you think about them?
Yep.
Any idea that I could throw out to you about how to solve the problem, unless you thought it was absolutely crazy, it would be destined to fail.
What do you mean?
Because, yeah, thanks for asking. Anything that has been and could have been tried, it has been tried, and it hasn't worked. Now, I'm starting with the assumption that there's a solution to this problem. So the solution must ostensibly strike someone as completely insane, or else it would have been tried and worked.
Okay. So what would be an example of something that's been tried and failed?
Oh, I don't know. Any kind of propaganda campaign, any kind of like, they came out with the protocols of the elders of Zion and that was debunked. The debunking didn't work. People still think Jews drink the blood of children, all this insane shit. Any kind of, explanation of Israel or explanation of, if you had thought about it, and any solution has to strike you as just, that could not possibly work, or it's just too stupid.
I don't know if the solution has to be crazy in order to have a chance of working. I mean, listen, here's my view, and
I'm almost certain that
like,
that's true, but go ahead.
This is not groundbreaking stuff, but I think there would need to be sort of like probably 4 to 6 different fronts on which this is being kind of fought. Number one, you got to expose the myth-making engine that, going all the way back to medieval Europe or before, started generating some of this stuff. I think there has to be an understanding as to how and why we separate criticism of Israel from Jew hatred, and understand that random American Jews are not responsible for Israeli policy or whatever. So I think that's like the second kind of pillar. I think left and right need to take anti-Semitism seriously. And I don't know that there's been a place or a time in the last several decades where it's been actually taken seriously by the political left and the political right. We've had periods where both political sides allow it to fester. And while they maybe don't overtly endorse it, they just kind of don't really do much about it at all. I think it's this sort of like not super titillating stuff that needs to be done in a serious way. And even as I say it, I'm not like optimistic that that's an easy thing to do. I agree with you that piecemeal, this stuff has sort of been tried.
Yeah. And if anything that you said, unless you want to make the argument that if we didn't do this, it would be worse, I'm amenable to that. I don't think that's necessarily true, but I mean, I have my own solution to this problem that I'm currently working on. but I'll just say that I think that when I tell you what it is, when I release this thing that I'm doing, you will have to say to yourself, that simply could not possibly work. Because
And that would be a sign that maybe we're on the right track, you're saying.
correct.
Okay.
That's one of the few examples of when you can say that's the case.
I mean, the other thing is, I don't
yeah.
believe it's even really possible to completely eliminate hatred of any group. I mean, you know, you think about the progress made in the United States since the civil rights movement in so many areas, and there has been massive progress. But like, there's still racism and discrimination among racial lines that exists. So I think it's also relevant to say, what's the lowest hanging fruit, the kind of 80-20 approach that will do the most good. But I don't know that you can completely eliminate hate of any.
Yeah, I don't think you can, but I think you can, like, I'm just thinking about the way that homosexuality is viewed, even in I'm 58, almost 59, even the way homosexuality has been viewed in my lifetime. We've made significant inroads to stop that madness. I just want to ask you kind of a few things I've been thinking about, because I don't really have a lot of opportunities to talk to people who are on the left. So I genuinely appreciate you coming on and having me on your show. I think I've been like 3 or 4 times. So thanks. So, like, if you were given a wand and you could change policies or make policies or change that, like, it has a wide berth, but you can only do it with a few things. What do you think are the most important things in your worldview that you'd like to see enacted?
So as a disclaimer, I'm not an accelerationist who believes the solution is in coming in and just like breaking down every system and trying to rebuild it in a different image. I think a lot of things are sort of working okay, or at least there's an infrastructure that, if tweaked, could function significantly better. So in my book, I kind of go through 5 global examples of where specific aspects of society, culture, and economies have been organized a little differently than in the United States. So like, I'll give you one example.
Yeah, please.
There's widespread agreement in the United States about socializing certain aspects of the country. So like the military and law enforcement, just about everybody agrees. We don't want for-profit mercenary armies and law enforcement. Like, we've agreed, we're going to socialize that. That's okay. When it comes to the roads, we've basically agreed municipalities and states for state highways, we're going to socialize that. We don't want all these different toll roads where Peter gets to do one road and charge. Okay. So in my view, I think we need some kind of socialization on healthcare. This doesn't mean you have to, I mean, even Bernie Sanders has said, you don't have to make for-profit insurance illegal. It can exist, but we need to go a little more and do a little bit more socialization on healthcare, sort of the way that like Denmark has done it, Sweden has done it, some other countries have done it. So this is just an example of how I think the most urgent sort of tweaks would be healthcare and education at the very sort of top. And then also finding some cohesive and functional path forward when it comes to climate. And this doesn't mean we like ban SUVs or whatever it is that some on the right kind of like to say we want to do, but just kind of come together and say, okay, here's the facts of the situation. Let's work together so that we can have standards of living that we still are okay with, but also kind of not keep sending IOUs to the future to kind of figure this thing out. Those are the areas I would immediately focus that I think are the lowest hanging fruit. And then one other would be rich countries like the United States. There is no fiscal reason why there should be homeless or hungry people. It's so comparatively inexpensive to deal with those things, but there's been a lack of political will and there's also political obstinacy. So I would try to deal with that. And there's some good experiments like from Utah and Missouri that have been done as to how to deal with that. Those would be my 4 areas of focus. It's not socialize everything. It's not, whatever, ban SUVs and steaks or any of this stuff. I would focus in those 4 areas.
Yeah, that's interesting. Just in the interest of time, I'll tell you what I think the two greatest problems facing this country are, and you tell me if you think I'm in la la land or if I'm tethered to reality.
Okay.
I think the largest problem facing this country, in fact, I would say the largest first, second, and third problems facing this country are the debt. We spend far more than we should. Okay, so I'll just say there without an explanation for now. And the second one will probably surprise you. In fact, I'm almost positive it's going to surprise you. But I think that our energy needs are grossly insufficient, particularly for the AI revolution. And
Our energy
China,
needs or our energy supply?
I'm jet lagged as hell. Our energy supply is grossly insufficient. And the Chinese, there's been some really good material. An account I follow on Twitter, pull it up with you. I think it's the last account I follow, where he advocates for nuclear and solar. But basically, the projections are in a very short period of time that each independent AI will need its own nuclear power plant to sustain itself. And I was actually thinking of buying land, just parenthetically, quote unquote, worthless land in the middle of nowhere, because I think solar cells are going to be quite common. But what do you think of those two things, the debt and energy? Yeah, this is it. Jesse Pelton, his Twitter feed is just fantastic. He talks about energy needs, solar, nuclear, etc. So I'd highly recommend following that one. What do you think of those two? Do you think I'm off base, or do you think I'm onto something, or neither?
Well, I mean, I think, listen, we should, all of these are important enough to warrant some discussion, but I think there's a couple things that are important to mention. You know, on the debt thing, first of all, the U.S. is not a household, so simply just kind of going like, I don't know, we have more and more debt, and like that's obviously bad and it's unsustainable. I think we have to think about the debt in that debt matters relative to the size of the economy.
True.
A lot of our debt is to ourselves. Like a huge portion of U.S. debt is held by U.S. institutions, pension funds, and the Fed. And so like it is a liability on one side, but it's also an asset on the other side. And so it's more of an accounting reality than it is a crisis, in my view. And then finally, I've not seen examples of where cutting spending has fixed an economy that is in a problematic state by virtue of being in debt. And so the instinct to say, even if we agree on the problem, the solution is just finding stuff to cut. I've not seen an empirical case made that that's the solution. That's on debt. I don't know if I don't think that, or go to energy.
Yeah, I don't think that's the only thing. But I mean, there's just so much to talk about. China dumping treasuries, the dollar is the fiat currency, petrodollars. I mean, it's a massive conversation.
Yeah.
Let's go to energy just to expedite, move things along. I'm utterly blown away, and Reed has been the one who's turned me on to being more aware of the coming AI revolution and whether or not we are truly at the beginning of the singularity, something I've been thinking about quite a bit lately. And the energy needs, or our energy infrastructure, is not where it needs to be to prepare for what's coming. And I'll just be very blunt with you. I'm deeply concerned. I'm not worried, but I am deeply concerned that the Chinese are going to win this AI race, and even seconds makes a difference. So, energy infrastructure. Is that with it?
So
does that
here's the
comport
thing.
with your worldview?
I think with energy, I don't think the real problem is a shortage of supply. It's the political and regulatory failure to like modernize how we're generating and storing and distributing energy. So there's like a few kind of things there. The US has huge raw energy capacity, but the grids are outdated. There's
Correct.
transmission bottlenecks, regulatory delays prevent
Correct.
faster scaling. The AI thing, you know, the thing I struggle with is 10 years ago, we were told Bitcoin can't possibly survive because of the energy demands. And then like, here we are. So there's a sort of like boy who cried wolf thing with this. And one of the realities is renewables are rapidly scaling. we're not yet seeing the grid drained. Technology adapts, industry will develop more efficient hardware. So I'm not saying like I don't care about this issue, but like the sky is falling. We'll be out of energy by X number of years, and then that comes and passes, and that's not the case. I think it's similar to the debt, where we've heard now for 40 years, fiscal cliff coming in 18 months, all the debt is coming due, everything will collapse. And then it's like, okay, well, that didn't happen. And we've heard that 15 times over the last 40 years. So I think with a lot of these issues, it's not just the engineers are going to figure it out, but sometimes I think the alarmism supplants thoughtfully thinking about what actually needs to be done.
Yeah, I'm hesitant to go down the path of, I think inductive arguments reach your place. I do think that, and again, I'm not by any stretch of the imagination an expert on energy efficiency, although I've recently invested both in Tesla and a battery company. So I guess I'm either I'm acting on my delusions or I'm acting on my convictions, which are reality.
Wait, so you're currently invested in Tesla?
I'm heavily invested. I'm almost all in. Reed, you want to talk about someone who's all in?
Jeez.
Reed is actually all in on Tesla. I'm almost all in on Tesla.
I would want to talk about that. You know, I've been public about when I've gotten in and out of Tesla, and I'm fully out of it. And I also have gotten rid of my Tesla. I think my view on Tesla, I'm curious yours. I think I invested in Tesla in 2017.
Yeah.
And the reason, and I rarely buy individual stocks. I'm basically just in diversified index funds because I don't think I'm smart enough or good enough to do individual stocks. But my thought on Tesla was significant first mover advantage. And on the range, meaning battery technology, just way ahead. And I ultimately finally got out of Tesla about a year something ago after selling sort of like tranches as they went up. I mean, listen, I made 1,600%. I made 1,600%.
Nice.
And the reason I got out was it's not a personal thing against Elon, but the combination of other brands catching up and honestly having far better build quality on the cars. I mean, the two Teslas I've had, significant build quality issues, and then seeing all of the other brands catch up in terms of range and just build better cars, just solid cars, combined with Elon's kind of irrationality and you know, whatever, he seemed less stable. It just seemed like Tesla lost that first mover advantage. So I got out, you know, a year plus ago. I'm curious why you're still in.
Oh, I'm not only in, I'm actually every dime that I have is now going to Tesla. And I thought about selling my house and buying Tesla stock. I would love, Reed doesn't like to talk too much, but I would love to get Reed on in this conversation because he is absolutely if you want to talk to a Tesla bull, there's no question Reed is about it. He just sold his house and he's putting it all into Tesla, his apartment. So, yeah, so I'll give you some of the reasons that I'm invested in Tesla. I will say that my first buy was at 426 and it went down to 200 and Reed told me to remain calm and it's up in the threes now. Reed, pull up the little Tesla index if you don't mind. So I'm in because I don't think that the Waymo, I think it's going to be the self-driving cars are going to be a revolution. I think people are going to buy those out. I shorted Uber. I actually told Bill Ackman that, you know, there it is. There's the thing. I bought it at 426. I'm convinced that it's going to go to 2,000 or more. I think you're going to see a bump to 1,000 within, 10 months or so. So I'm thinking about the self-driving car. I'm thinking about the batteries. I'm thinking about the
but let's take those one step at a time because that's a
partnership with Trump. Yeah, go ahead.
So let's see. Batteries. The other manufacturers are almost caught up. And so I struggle to think that now, all of a sudden, Tesla is again going to have a big leap on batteries. Self-driving cars, for more than a decade, Elon has said it's 6 months away. Literally for a decade, Elon has said it's 6 months away, and it doesn't seem to be. And then the partnership with Trump, I mean, Trump's got 3 years and however many months left. He and Elon already seem to sort of be on the outs. I don't think the Trump administration is going to give Tesla anything serious that would make me want to be invested in it. I mean, these are just opinions, right? I could be completely
Yeah,
wrong.
for
and you
sure.
might be
No,
right.
no,
I'm
I
just
just
telling you why I got out a year ago.
I'm glad you said that. We're not giving financial advice to anyone.
Of course.
Yeah, I told Reed
My
that
real financial advice
yeah.
is don't invest in individual stocks. That's my real financial advice.
Yeah, I've broken that with a few. I'm heavily invested. Tesla's my biggest investment, but I shorted Uber. I shorted the euro, which was doing well for a while. But I'm still making money on it. But Reed, if you'd love to jump in, Reed is like an encyclopedic knowledge of why Tesla's good. The other reason I'm very hopeful and I'm extremely optimistic that I just don't see. It's just the idea that you could buy a Tesla. Reed said he's good. Just the idea that you could buy a Tesla and then go to sleep, and this is why I shorted Uber, and then have it act as a robo-taxi, and then have it self-cleaned, and then bring it back to when you wake up in the morning, and then pay off your car loan that way to get a free car. That's pretty extraordinary to me. I go all around the world and I see what people are driving, and I talk to people about what they're driving and what they're interested in. Now, I will say when I bought it at 426, I did not anticipate a crazy backlash against Elon in particular. So I certainly didn't anticipate that. I'm not giving financial advice, but I think the robo taxis. I think that supply right now, it's not that it's not caught up with demand, but I think that the way to look at it, it's a mistake to think, oh, Tesla has sold this many cars, X cars at time index T, and therefore we can infer from past sales of this likely sale distribution. I think that that's the wrong way to look at it, because I don't think it takes into account the fact that Tesla has a tremendous advantage in the self-driving vehicle, and it just looks better. And then when you look at surveys from Tesla owners, I would argue that you're the exception. By and large, they're the most satisfied of any customer. But again, I could be totally wrong about this. I bought it at 426, so what do I know? All right.
I mean, the anecdotal counterpoint.
Yeah, please.
Tesla market share has only been declining now for a year and a half. Number one. And then number two, I have a Rivian now. On the highway, the Rivian self-driving, which is it's not self-driving. It's not even a feature that Rivian even makes a big deal out of. It works better than the Tesla one did. And it's like Rivian doesn't even make a big deal out of it. So I hesitate to even think that they're even really as close as you think on that.
If I'm asked, do you lease it, buy it, rent it?
I did lease it. The reason I'm leasing electric vehicles right now is the technology is improving so quickly that I think I mean, look at the Tesla. I used to have a Model Y. The price was cut like 40%. The more problems Elon had, the more he cut the price. Had I bought it, I would have been left with such a depreciated car. Right now, I like the idea that I'll pick the best technology right now, lease it for 3 years, and then the depreciation is someone else's problem. Even though in a sense, the lease is you paying for depreciation. That irony is not lost on me. But the idea there is now I can just free and clear figure out who's got the most interesting technology today.
Yeah, that's why I no longer have a car. I no longer have a home really, but that's why I turned in my leased car and I didn't lease another car. And that's the other reason I like leasing cars. If I may ask, you don't have to tell me if you don't want to. How much do you lease your car, that Riviera, for?
You know, I don't remember, and I don't necessarily know that that's something I would say on air, but just because it can be so variable based on, I got this deal where they were, if you had a gas powered car, you got an extra discount. I don't remember, but
okay. All right.
Very
I'm curious.
Similar to the Tesla, surprisingly, even though it's a more expensive car.
Because I used to drive Saturns because they were an American car, and then Saturn went out of business, and then I got in a very serious car accident, and I started leasing. My buddy was seriously hurt in that accident, and then I started leasing a car, and then I just did this lease thing for, I don't even know, 15 years, and it was cool to always have a new car. So I enjoyed that anyway. That I don't know why we started talking about that, but we got 2 super chats here. Reed, let's post them up. Gavitron is a good man. Oh, he's from Canada. Has David revised his opinion on Biden's mental decline pre-2025, or does the new evidence around this from Jake Tapper strengthen his opinion? That's for you.
I don't know exactly what specific factual claims Jake Tapper is making. I know that he has a book out about this. I don't really read that genre of book because I'm steeped in that stuff enough. So I read, other things. But I mean, listen, revised. My view was Biden should never have run for re-election to begin with.
I agree.
I acknowledge that Biden had declined due to age relative to 2012 and 2016. I remained convinced until the June 27 debate that the risks of pulling Biden were greater than of keeping him in despite the decline. At June 27th, my view changed on that. And on June 28th, I told my audience, I now believe that the risks of staying in are greater than of getting out. And then my only personal anecdote is when I went to the White House in December of 2024 and spent 20 minutes with Biden. As a non-doctor, I detected nothing unusual in the way he was relating to or talking to us. But of course, that's an extremely limited interaction.
Sure. Okay, cool. Thanks, Gav, for your question. And we got another one, Reed. Matthew Johnson. David, if you swap out President Smith for Trump, can you objectively look at the first 100 days of his term and find nothing that you support? So let's say that some wild card candidate got in there. What would you? So somebody not named Trump who didn't look like Trump. I get the more qualifiers I put on there, the more.
No, listen, I get the question. I mean, listen, here's how I would answer it. They're including raising the SALT cap in the tax plan that was passed. Yeah. I'm in favor of raising the SALT cap. I was against reducing it in 2017. I've been advocating for increasing it since. That's in the House version of the tax bill. I support that. That's, I guess, something that Trump did. So, I mean, I guess that's something.
Hey, let me ask you a question since I have you here. So I've been complaining about this and wondering about this. I told you I'm 58. Ever since I can remember, the people on the left have been freaking out, frankly, and I think they have every right to be freaking out that the military wasn't being audited, or that the military failed its audits. Bernie Sanders comes out and says, and whatever anyone thinks about Bernie, I think he has a lot of integrity. Bernie Sanders comes out and he says, yeah, you know what? The military should be audited. And I'm like, well, yeah, of course the military should be. Why wouldn't the military be always? I mean, of course the military should be audited. And then I read all these critiques, and I wish I could give you a name, and I'm so tired. I read all these critiques of people freaking out that they, on the left, that they want to audit the military. And I'm just completely like, is it so partisan that like, I was just like almost at the point. So this is what I'm not going to mention the member of his administration, but this is what I told a member of his administration. I'm like, listen, whatever you want to think about Cenk Unger, this guy has come out and said, we need to audit the military. Like, put this guy on the panel. Let's get a bunch of leftists and we'll put them on the panel and we'll audit the shit out of the military. Why wouldn't you want the military? Like, I honestly can't understand what the thinking there is. Help me think through that.
So, I mean, if there's people that don't want to audit the military, I'd want to hear their explanation as to exactly why. I think, okay. I guess another question is, what do you even really mean by audit the military? So it's been a few months since I last looked into this, but one of the things that I remember was happening was the phrase "they failed the audit" was being understood as money is literally missing. But
no, that's not
what I understood is that systems are extraordinarily fragmented and very disorganized. And so like the tracing is the problem, but it's not evidence to me that money has been stolen necessarily. I'm open to that, but it's just not any. I've not seen any proof of
Right.
that, and I have no issue auditing the military. We should just
Yeah.
be on the same page as to what we mean by that.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but if the system is very complicated and we don't know where the money is, isn't that more reason to audit this? Isn't that more reason to have an audit?
Sure. I mean, again, I'd want to hear more about why people don't want to do the
Yeah, me
audit.
too.
And it's conceivable, Peter. It's conceivable that this audit versus don't audit thing has become a proxy for some other political position. And so I, as someone who's not steeped in the military finances, to me, it would be like, why wouldn't you audit? However, I would want to know more about why people are for and against it, because this may actually be a proxy debate about something else.
Yeah, my guess is you're right. My guess is it is a proxy. I don't know that. I do think the Trump administration missed a golden opportunity to put a bunch of leftists on there to audit the military. That's the first. That would have been my first.
Well, you know,
No,
this is one of the funny
serious.
things. There were some people on the left who had fallen for the idea that Trump was open to cutting military spending. This was one I was hearing from some of my friends on the left, like, no, I think he might really do it. And of course, within like weeks of getting in, we got a formal declaration. This is not the time to reduce the military budget. We're not going to be doing that. And so I say that only to say there are certain perspectives that I expected to be the ones that are really the real ones from this administration on the military. And that's holding to be true, regardless of what people thought in October of last year.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm just gonna I'll give you my unlettered opinion. You know, Trump wants a modified version. Charlie Kirk just tweeted this out of the Iron Dome, a kind of a more sophisticated version. This idea that you have to launch a nuclear weapon is completely crazy to me. In fact, if you were going to say, you know, I only mentioned 2 issues before in the interest of time, but in the top 5, one of my issues would have been loose nukes. If I were the Iranians, for sure, I would have purchased nuclear weapons from the former Soviets, you know, the Russians, and put them on cargo ships and put them in some city in the United States. I would have already done that. And if they attacked me, I would have just taken out Chicago or what have you. And so it's a very odd notion. I don't know. It just seems to me that this whole like battleship thing is the weirdest fucking, like, it's obviously going to be drones. You know, we spent a lot of Reed and Travis and I spent a lot of time in Taiwan, and we talked to Taiwanese defense officials about, you know, they're taking a good long look at Ukraine and the war. And I don't know. I just think so much of our thinking is outdated. I don't know why we're not spending more money on cybersecurity. I don't know why we're not spending more money protecting us against EMP pulses, et cetera. But then again, what do I know? I don't really know anything. All right, cool. Is there anything I shouldn't have asked you that I should have asked you that I didn't ask you?
Nothing I can think of. This is your ball game. I'm just playing in it.
Oh no, that's cool. I just, you know, if something I should have is there anything you wanted to ask me?
You know, I didn't really come prepared with questions necessarily. No, I mean, so you said you don't really have a home. Are you kind of sort of like a just roving nomad at this point?
Yeah. I basically, you know, my schedule between now and December 28th is completely booked. I'll be in Nashville. I'll be in Genspect in Albuquerque. I'm speaking at Villanova on a free speech talk. I'm going to be I'm just speaking constantly and lecturing and giving tours and doing spectrum street epistemology. And, you know, the other thing I'm trying to do is, I was talking to Douglas Mario a while ago about that. I don't say that to name drop. I just say that to kind of like place this, you know, there's been so much criticism of things. I'd like to start building and making constructive contributions. So Reed and I are doing a lot of teacher training. We were at Vertex Academy, which is a predominantly Black high school in the Bronx, and we did spectrum street epistemology and teacher training there. And we're going to go to Catherine Birbelsing School in Michaela and likely do that in London. And we're going to do that with indigenous Maori in New Zealand. We're going to go back there and then Reed's working on getting this in talented and gifted programs. But criticism is great, and I think it's important, and I think we need to do that. But we also need to teach people how to deal with criticism, and we need to teach people how to have to clean up their epistemology and have productive conversations. So I'm doing a lot of the teacher training stuff. I'm trying to move out of the culture war space because I just think it's just all too stupid. I mean, I thought it's all too stupid from day one. So I'm basically traveling year round. I don't have a house. I don't have a home. I'm in Hungary at the moment. I'm going to be mostly US focused, but I'm living my best life. I'm having a great time doing work that matters, eating great meals. Living great.
What's the longest flight delay you've taken in all of this?
That's a good question. Oh boy, I took a day and a half, I think, to get back from New Zealand. I think. The other thing is I'm doing jujitsu everywhere I go, so that's been kind of fun. Pretty hardcore.
It's interesting. I just read this book by Laurie Woolever, who was Anthony Bourdain's assistant.
Yeah.
And apparently he would do wherever they were filming, he would find a place to take a jujitsu class.
Yeah, that's what most people do who travel a lot. And it's interesting. You have like a built-in, people overuse the word community. But in this case, it really is a community. Like you have a group of people who you develop these close relationships and you trust them. And so I've been going all around the world and doing that. And, like the other night, I just, everywhere I go, like literally everywhere I go out and I have dinner with someone. Yeah, I think Bourdain was a black belt in jiu-jitsu, if memory serves me correctly, which is an astonishing accomplishment. I'm a brown belt, and that's taken me a long time. There was a lot of suffering in that, I assure you. A lot of people riding my skull with their knees. But yeah, so anyway, I'm living my best life. It's great. Travis is over there working, putting on, just doing a lot of spectrum street epistemology and trying to move away from the criticism and more towards the positive stuff, and been thinking a lot about this Jew hatred stuff recently. And so I'm probably going to devote some bandwidth to trying to tackle that in some productive way. So in other words, not just criticizing, but, something positive to move the whole humanity toward flourishing. That's the goal.
That all sounds good.
Cool. Well, thanks, man. Thanks for being on the show. We appreciate it. Reed, pull up his book again. And where can people find you, David?
Honestly, too many places: YouTube, TikTok, Spotify, and Apple Music. My book is in local bookstores, Barnes and Nobles, etc.
Cool. Wow, 3.2 million subscribers. Holy shit, man. That's pretty impressive. My goodness. That's really good. Congratulations. That's good. Oh, wow. Your book. Pull up his book again, Reed. Pull up the book title. Holy shit, dude. Your book already has 1,000, my goodness, 1,130 comments. Holy moly. That is indeed impressive.
It did hit New York Times bestseller right away.
Good for you, man. Wow.
Thank you.
That's impressive. All right. Keep your browser open. Thanks to Reed for doing what he does, and thanks for being on the show, and I appreciate it. Well, thanks for everybody for your comments. We appreciate it.
Thank you.